This is a KSPS Vote 2020 election special, a debate featuring candidates for Washington State Representative.
Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Christy Goranson. KSPS is pleased to bring you the debate featuring the candidates running for state representative in District 4, Position 2, representing Spokane Valley. Let me introduce the candidates to you. Rob Chase is a former two-term Spokane County treasurer and is running as a Republican. Chase-Gurel is a CPA in the Valley and is running as a Democrat. Welcome to you both. For this debate, the candidates will answer questions from two Spokane journalists. Adam Shanks is a reporter for the Spokesman Review, and sitting 6 feet away from Adam is Doug Nedvornik, program director and news director at Spokane Public Radio. Before we begin, I want to go over a few of the debate rules for our viewers. These rules were agreed to by the candidates. Let's take a look at those rules. The panel can ask the same question to all of the candidates, or they can direct the question to just one. The panelist may request a follow-up to an answer. Candidates will have 1 minute for answers. Candidates will be allowed 2 rebuttals for the entire debate. Rebuttal length will be limited to 30 seconds. So let's begin. A coin flip determined that, Mr. Chase, you will take the first question, and that will come from Doug. Let's get started.
So you're very different candidates philosophically. So from the very start, I want to give viewers a chance to clarify those and see how you're different. So I'm going to ask you both to explain very quickly what your idea about the basic role of government is in our society. And Rob, we'll have you start.
Well, I believe the basic role of government at any level is to protect our rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And, but I think we should limit government, because you have to be very careful. If you give government too power, then they start becoming what we hated, that what started our country in the first place with the founders. So, I believe in limited government. Anymore today, limited government almost sounds like an extreme thing, but because both parties, I think, have moved to the left. But myself, I'm conservative, but if you had put me in the middle of the, back 30 years ago, I probably would have been in the middle of the Bell spectrum, whereas now it seems like we've gone to the left so much. Now I think it's time for us to come back and get back to the basics.
Mr. Gurel?
I think my idea of government comes from the fact that I grew up taking civics classes, and I remember thinking about government as being of the people, by the people, and for the people. And I'm an accountant. Last year was the first year I ran for public office. I've never considered myself a politician and still don't. I prefer to think of myself more as a citizen who's stepping up to help man a government that's by the people, help people a government that's by the people, a government that is made up of accountants, people like all of us, and people who will go to Olympia and carry the voices of the people, representing everybody in their community and helping raise the voices of people whose voices have been silenced.
All right, Mr. Gurel, you'll take this next question from Adam.
Hi. So I'm wondering what role you think the state and the state legislature can play in supporting small businesses through the economic recovery following the coronavirus pandemic.
I think it's been a very difficult challenge for state government to step into a role that previously has been expected to be played by the federal government in being prepared for disasters. I personally think that while our state government made some mistakes, that I think our state government did very well. I think that our state, when I look at the maps of the states in the country that are lighting up because COVID's increasing, every day I'm glad to see that Washington isn't one of them. Now, I realize Eastern Washington is in a bit of an uptick now, but I support what the governor has done to promote a mask ban. I think the sooner we all wear masks and distance, the sooner that our businesses can get back to work, and the sooner our children can get back to school.
Mr. Chase?
Okay, I think what the legislature can do is help prevent the same thing from happening again. I think this is a huge overreaction. all across the country, across the world, and especially in Washington State. So we have to learn from our mistakes, I think. And the COVID thing didn't seem to be any worse than any other pandemic that's come through, except it did curtail a lot of our rights. So there shouldn't be these mandates. People, you watch them, and they're able to social distance anyway out of politeness, or wear a mask in a business that requires one. But businesses should be allowed to either require masks or not require masks. Customers should be able to patronize those places whoever they want to. But if they do require a mask, then they should be polite enough to wear one. So we didn't have policemen on every corner making us do these things. They could have been voluntary. And like I said, I think the whole coronavirus thing, there's a lot of hidden factors that we don't see. All the businesses that have been lost, and other social problems, like families breaking up, suicides. And then, like I said, I think it just reached 1 million deaths worldwide. But
Mr. Chase, I think you're out of time.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. You will answer this next question, which comes from Doug.
So let's stay on the coronavirus. Some people want to put limits on the governor's authority to declare emergencies or limit the amount of time in an emergency. What do you think about that? And if you want to expound a little more on how you think the governor has handled the coronavirus situation.
Well, like I said, he did overreact. And, I think you should still be able, during pandemics or any emergency, still keep our constitutional rights intact. Now, maybe you could say at the beginning, people didn't know it was weaponized possibly and all that, so we didn't know what we were dealing with, but I thought it would be over by Easter. So, for instance, in Africa didn't suffer nearly as much, and yet I understand that there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of children that have died in sub-Saharan Africa because of the COVID lockdowns, because it destroyed the supply chains there. So a lot of these things, you just see the headlines on statistics, but like Stalin said, 1 death is a tragedy, 1 million deaths is a statistic. So we have to be smart about what we're doing. And when I get to Olympia, I'll work across the island with everything. How can we solve this? How can we prevent this from happening again?
So let me just follow up. Did you give a yes or no answer on should there be limits put on the governor's ability to declare emergencies?
Yes, I think maybe after 2 weeks or so, it should automatically go to the legislature to be called in.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Mr. Gurel?
I would say that the call for a special session was a bit of an overreaction initially. We're fortunate to have found out that the budget shortfall, by latest estimates, is only half what we expected. We do have rainy day funds and surpluses that can cover the government just fine until the legislature meets in January. It would have been an enormous extra expense to call the legislature into special session. I think that the governor's acted with the council and approval of the heads of the Senate and House of both parties, even though the legislature wasn't called into session. The Republican and Democratic leaders counseled him. So I believe in science. I believe what the doctors say, and I don't think that the governor overreached.
Okay.
Right, thank you. Adam, your question. We'll go to Mr. Gurel first.
Well, since you mentioned it, the legislature will have to tackle the budget shortfall, and while we don't know how large that shortfall is yet, how would you look to address it? Would you support raising taxes to raise revenues, or would you look to make cuts to the state budget?
The first thing I would look at is what are the essential services that we as a community demand. I don't think this is the time to be cutting the budget, cutting expenses for law enforcement, for first responders, for education. I think that we do have to look in a sophisticated way at how are we going to tackle the problem of taking care of the crumbling roads and bridges that we have. How are we going to make sure that the essential things that government needs to do continue? So I oppose the idea of across-the-board cuts. I think that we do need new revenue sources. I oppose a general income tax. I think a tax on high earners, either through capital gains or a tax on people making over $1 million, is what's called for to make up the revenue shortfall.
Thank you, Mr. Chase.
Well, I think that if we won't know till further down the road what our situation is, revenues aren't what they used to be. But just like the people of the state that have been affected by this, the state has to tighten its belt also, if that's what needs to be, and prioritize what's important, what adds value, and what doesn't. Get rid of that. So you get too many taxes, and pretty soon people move out of the state because they don't want to pay it, and that you lose revenue that way. So we got to look at other maybe possibilities for other revenues. I think my opponent's in favor of an income tax and perhaps even a carbon tax too, and a capital gains tax. You've heard of the state of Texas. We don't want to be a state of taxes, here in Washington State. So there are some other things I've been looking at. I've been working with Senator Hasagawa on the idea of a state bank where the money is the funds that they have, instead of just buying bonds and investing in other places, we can invest in infrastructure like the state of North Dakota has, the North Dakota Bank, which I think is a great idea. There's a great book on it by Ellen Brown, and it's
right, you're out of time, Mr.
Web of
Chase.
Debt. Okay.
Thank you.
The public banking solution.
Thank you. Would you like a rebuttal?
Yes.
Mr. Gurel?
I agree with Mr. Chase that a state bank is a good idea, something we should look at. But I don't think we can naively say that we're not going to have to raise revenue in order to maintain essential services. I think that's a naive way to look at it. A state bank isn't going to solve that. And tightening a belt in the time of a pandemic when the needs of our communities are so great is not going to solve it either.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chase, you will take this next question from Doug.
So this is the one race in all the Spokane area legislative races that is truly open. There's no incumbent returning. The person who's leaving the office, Representative Matt Shea, you have told me encouraged you to run for this. So what are the similarities and differences that you have with Representative Chase? And then I'll ask a different question to Mr. Gurel.
Okay, well, we're both what you might call paleo-conservatives. We believe in the old values and getting back to the Constitution. We share that. I was Matt Shea's first campaign manager, and I've always supported him. He's gotten some bad press, I think, because he went down to Malheur and Bundyville or whatever it was, but that's Matt Shea's idea of a good time on his vacation. It was on his own time and his own money. So it didn't affect anything. He just has a passion for property rights. So he did nothing illegal, and this Shea Manifesto, which is a name, given to it by the Guardian, it was nothing more than a Bible study, comparing just war of Aquinas and Augustine, against the biblical standard for war. Why is there a difference how war was waged? Well, just war, which Matt believes in, is a defensive war. So how could that be a threat to anybody if you believe warfare should always be defensive? So I think it got a bad rap on that.
Right,
but we're pretty close.
You're out of time, Mr. Chase. Mr. Gurel?
So, Mr. Gurel, then you are running as a Democrat in a deep red district. It's been a long time since they've elected a Democrat. How do you appeal to Republicans to get them to cross the aisle and vote for you?
It has been almost 3 decades since the fourth elected a Democrat. I feel like, for one, as an accountant, I'm well qualified to go to Olympia and tackle the big problems that we're facing. I think that people who know me and have heard me understand that I'm for representing everybody. I don't feel like I'm going to Olympia to represent Democrats. I'm going to Olympia to represent my entire community, and I have Republicans who are supporting me. I believe that the values, the true family values of community and stewardship, taking care of our families, and are values that Mr. Shea has not taken over, I believe that I'm a better representative of true family values.
All right, Mr. Gurel, you will answer this next question from Adam.
Well, also on the top of the legislature's agenda is discussing police reform, and that could take many different shapes. There are lots of ideas on the table, from a ban on chokeholds to a decertification process for officers who act out of line. What reforms would you support, and can you be specific?
I think the biggest thing that we could do as a legislature to aid law enforcement is to refund mental health services. Years ago, we closed down state mental hospitals. Currently, we expect law enforcement to take care of problems from our neighbors who end up homeless and countless people who end up in the criminal justice system, where if we had adequate diversion courts and diversion services, they wouldn't be there. So one of the things we can do to help law enforcement is to take away some of these jobs other than law enforcement that we've put on them.
If I could follow up,
please.
You mentioned refunding mental health services. Would you divert funding or support diverting funding from police departments to support those mental health services?
Currently, Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich has a program going in Spokane County. I'm afraid I don't recall the name, but a program where mental health professionals ride with sheriff deputies on a full shift. So that when there are calls that involve somebody who is possibly in a crisis that wouldn't necessarily require law enforcement, that we can have mental health professionals go with deputies. I think we should fund those programs fully. I think that should be the rule, not the exception. I think every shift should be able to have mental health professionals. So I think there are a lot of areas where honestly, law enforcement needs resources given to them in better ways. If I can, one other thing. I was startled to read that Sheriff Knezovich had requested money for body cams for all of his deputies.
You're out of time, Mr. Gurel. Thank you. Mr. Chase?
Well, police play a very important part, in our republic. That they're very well trained, I think, most of them. There's tens of thousands of police all around the country, and every once in a while you get a few bad apples that might get through. But, I don't think more regulations are going to help things much. Lance is right, you have to help the helpless, and have people that don't have reasonable minds, that are out there. But still, there's a lot of other things to do, and not add more duties to the police, because they already have a lot to think about anyway. So defunding the police, I think, is absolutely crazy. I never thought that could anybody even bring that up. Because who are you going to call when somebody robs your house or attacks your family? Or that they're there to protect our lives and our property.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chase. Mr. Chase, you'll take this next question from Doug.
So I want to ask about transportation funding. The $30 car tab initiative is going forward, it looks like, in the state of Washington. And there's a lot of worry about how that's going to affect funding for the North-South Freeway, but it would also affect funding for valley projects, such as those roads where they intersect with railroad crossings and building roadways over or under. How much of a priority is that for you if you're elected to the legislature?
Well, we've got to have good roads and transportation to, help the free flow of commerce. That's very important. That's high up there on our priority list too. But we have to see what is left over after the COVID thing. Maybe some of these things we have to delay also. But I'm like I told you, I was with Senator Hasagawa, having a state bank and using revenues from that to be directed towards infrastructure, and of course highways and all that are a major part of our infrastructure. I had one idea too that maybe the state treasurer, Dwayne Davidson, could have a website where you can donate money to whatever department you want to. If you think $30 tabs are bad, then you can donate more of your money. Like President Obama said a few years ago, get more skin in the game for people that can afford that. So it'd be interesting to see how many people did do that. Some might want to donate more to higher education or K through 12 or whatever they think, a state patrol, Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Gurel.
So the question was, how much of a priority would it be to find more transportation funding for Spokane Valley projects, such as the railroad-related road projects?
I think it's a huge priority, and to me, it's one of the areas that demonstrates the fact that even in these COVID times, there are certain things that need to happen, and one of those is the preservation of our roads. And, I don't want to look at my grandchildren years from now and they say, why didn't you fix the crumbling roads and bridges in your generation when you had a chance? And you could have done it for pennies on the dollar. I don't want to say it's because we wouldn't tax millionaires. And where Mr. Chase is emphasizing that I want an income tax, I want a tax on millionaires and high earners. I know it's not going to affect me, and I doubt that any of you are taking your time here today if that affects you. I think that people making that level of money should be contributing extra because our infrastructure needs are essential. Businesses will suffer.
You're out of time. Thank you, Mr. Gurel. Next question will be from Adam to Mr. Gurel.
So do you support Referendum 90, which would require comprehensive sexual health education in public schools?
Yes, I do. And it's a difficult question, I know, especially for a lot of families. But and there's been a lot of misinformation spread around about what's contained in the bill by people trying to use fear to scare people. The core of the Senate bill is to teach consent and what they call bodily autonomy, that you're in control from whether you're in kindergarten on through. It teaches kids who can touch their body and where, very specifically. Now, it doesn't teach sexual acts like people say it does. I think it's important for schools to take a leading role as a health issue, to teach consent, and to teach children about their bodies.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Gurel. You're out of time. Mr. Chase?
Okay, and I believe, sexual education belongs first in the home. And, to mandate it in schools, what kind of curriculum are they going to teach? A lot of my friends had a problem with the Planned Parenthood curriculum that they didn't want taught. I mean, kids don't really need to know those things until, a certain age. And like I said, it belongs in the homes too. And I think one thing too is some people worry that, okay, you don't want to offend anybody anymore, so anything goes. Nothing's sacred. Nothing, it's all open. So we're getting away from the traditional values, I think, that we used to have. So we need to listen to people, especially in the 4th District, on how they feel about that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chase. You'll have this next question. Would you like a rebuttal, Mr. Gurel?
Yeah. The key to this Senate bill is to give local control over the curriculum to the local school districts and to parents. This is not a curriculum that's passed down and imposed from Olympia. Parents and school districts decide what's best for their kids in their schools. I think it's a perfect example of local control working the way it should work.
Thank you. And that was your final rebuttal for this debate. The next question will go to Mr. Chase. Doug?
So we've been reminded in the last month that we're in wildfire territory through the wildfires and the high winds that blew through around Labor Day. Lots of legislators have talked over the years about the need for more funding sources, dedicated funding sources for wildfire prevention and suppression. What do you believe about that? Should the state be spending more money to prevent wildfires and then for more people to suppress them?
Well, when I get to Olympia, I can talk to the Forest Service. What are your ideas on that? There's, of course, on both sides, of the thing, that some people have different ideas on forest management. And of course, it's out there that we have gone so far, protecting the spotted owl and these other things, that we've let old growth build up, so it's almost like a tinder box, and we remember Firestorm 91 that happened here in Spokane. But it doesn't happen every year. It's hard to predict, so maybe you have emergency funding at the rainy day fund that you draw from and then build it up again once that situation is over. So, I know some of the kernels or the parts of the pine cones and everything don't germinate until they've had severe temperatures, to make them pop, and then they go. But there's a lot of factors to that, so I'd have to listen to the experts on that.
Okay. All right. Mr. Gurel?
It's been a tragic situation, and I don't have any easy answers on this. I'm not sure where more funding is needed, honestly. I don't know how we can protect our cities from the kinds of fires that have destroyed our neighboring towns. I live right at the base of the Dishman-Mica Ridge, within a mile, and there's roads to cross, but I worry about what can be done to have better defensive barriers around our cities. As far as knowing how to fund the fire better, the fire situation better, again, I would be looking to our Department of Natural Resources and to our public lands people.
All right, thank you. Well, that is going to be our last question. So it's time now for closing statements. And Mr. Chase, you will go first. You have 1 minute.
Okay. Well, thank you, Christy, and panelists, and my opponent, Lance Gurel. I've been here since Spokane Expo 74, so I've been here a long time. And most of that time I've lived in the 4th District, so I know the 4th District very well. My values are conservative, and so is the 4th District. And that's why they kept returning Mike Padden, Matt Shea, Bob McCaslin to office all the time. So I think I can better represent the 4th District by being conservative, but I do have a reputation for working across the aisle, and common cause projects where everybody agrees on something that needs to be done are my favorite things to do, because if it's across the spectrum, then you know that it's probably the right thing to do. So I plan on listening to anybody who wants to talk to me, and I was county treasurer for 8 years, and I kept my term limits pledge, and so I think having the experience of going to Olympia and lobbying myself will make me a good representative.
All right, thank you. Mr. Gurel?
I think it's time for a change. I think for too long we've had extremists representing us in Olympia, and I think that Rob Chase is more of the same. That's why I'm working with Democrats and Republicans to help build a community that will represent all of us, not just one particular segment of the valley. I want to build a better future for everyone. As a certified public accountant, I'm the right choice to go to Olympia, to work on the budget. I have grandchildren and great-grandchildren living in this area, and I want to make this area a wonderful area for them in the future. I don't want to kick our responsibilities to fix our community. I don't want to kick those responsibilities down the road. I think it's time that we need to step up and have responsible voices in Olympia, and I will be proud to represent the entire 4th District.
Well, thank you to you both. That will have to do it for this debate. Our thanks to each of the candidates, as well as to our journalists, Adam Shanks and Doug Nedvornik. For all of us at KSPS, thank you for watching.